The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I had just set my coffee cup down on the kitchen counter and was watching the steam rise in the early light. My phone buzzed against the marble, and when I saw my daughter's name on the screen, something in my chest tightened before I even answered. A mother knows. You carry your children in your body for 9 months, and even 30 years later, some part of you never stops reading the signals. Mom, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm here, I said. Talk to me. There was a long pause. I could hear wind on her end, and what sounded like traffic. Not the muffled traffic of someone inside a building. Open air. She was outside. Claire? I set the coffee down. Where are you? I'm at Riverside Park, she said. The one near the old boathouse. Mom, I didn't know where else to go. I was already moving toward my keys. I spotted her from 50 yards away. She was sitting on a bench near the water, with her coat pulled tight around her, even though it wasn't that cold. My granddaughter Lily was asleep against her shoulder, mouth open, still in her pajamas under a zipped fleece jacket. 2 large suitcases stood upright beside the bench, like sentinels. A tote bag sat open at Claire's feet, and I could see Lily's stuffed rabbit spilling out of the top. My daughter looked up when she heard my footsteps on the gravel path. She was 34 years old, and she looked about 12. Her eyes were swollen. She hadn't slept. I sat down beside her without saying a word. I put my arm around her, and she leaned into me the way she used to when she was small and had a bad dream. Lily stirred but didn't wake. Tell me everything, I said, quietly. From the beginning. She took a breath. Daniel's father came to the house last night. He and Daniel had been talking for weeks. I didn't know. I thought things were difficult between them. I had no idea they'd been planning this. She stopped. He told me that I was no longer welcome in that house, that the property was in the family trust and my name was never on anything, and that if I didn't leave voluntarily, he would involve his attorneys in the morning. I kept my hand on her back and said nothing. He said, she stopped again, pressed her lips together. He said I had always been beneath their family, that I came from nothing and I'd always been nothing, and that Daniel had finally come to his senses. She exhaled slowly. Then Daniel stood right there in the doorway and didn't say a single word. He just stood there. I looked out at the river. The water was gray and flat in the early morning. And your job? I asked, because I already suspected. He called the office before I even had a chance to get Lily's things together. Daniel's father is the majority investor in Whitmore and Associates. I've worked there for 6 years. She shook her head. My supervisor texted me at 10 o'clock at night. They were very sorry. It was not a reflection of my performance. I sat with that for a moment. Lily shifted in her sleep, and her small hand found the edge of Claire's sleeve and held on. That small hand. Those little fingers. Grandma? Lily opened her eyes, blinking slowly, confused by the water and the morning and the bench. When are we going home? Claire looked at me over the top of her daughter's head. Her eyes filled. I smoothed Lily's hair back from her forehead and smiled at her. We're going to Grandma's house, sweetheart. You can sleep in the big bed. Lily considered this, then closed her eyes again, apparently satisfied. I looked at my daughter. Get your bags, I said. Let's go. What Daniel's father did not know, what Daniel himself had apparently forgotten, or perhaps had never fully understood, was who I actually was. My name is Margaret Calloway. I am 63 years old. I live alone now in a house near the water that I bought with my own money, which I earned over 35 years of work that most people in my current life know very little about. I am the woman who hosts the neighborhood block party every 4th of July. I bring casseroles to sick neighbors. I have white hair that I stopped coloring 4 years ago, and I drive a sensible car, and I go to bed at 10 o'clock most nights. What very few people know is that, before all of that, I spent 2 decades building a commercial real estate firm from a single leased office with secondhand furniture and a phone that sometimes didn't work. I sold that company when I was 51 for an amount I won't share here because my mother raised me not to discuss money at the dinner table. What I will tell you is that the number had 8 digits and that the wire transfer cleared on a Thursday, and that I cried in my car afterward for about 20 minutes alone in a parking garage because my mother wasn't alive to see it. After the sale, I did some things I'd always wanted to do. I traveled. I took up sailing, which I was terrible at. I read books I'd been putting off for 30 years. And eventually, quietly, I started doing what I had always done. I started investing. Not loudly, not visibly. Through a holding company with an unremarkable name that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. Whitmore and Associates, the firm where my daughter had worked for 6 years, had received a significant capital injection 18 months earlier. They'd been struggling after losing 2 major clients in the same quarter. A holding company called Blue Water Capital had come in and stabilized them. Blue Water Capital was mine. I had not told Claire. This is the part I have gone back and forth on many times since. I had not told her because I didn't want her to feel that her success at the firm was anything other than her own. She was excellent at her job. She deserved to know that the promotions she'd earned were genuinely earned, not smoothed along by her mother's money sitting quietly in the background. I had been a silent investor. I had never interfered. And now I sat in my kitchen across from my exhausted daughter while Lily slept upstairs in the guest room, and I thought about what to do next. "Mom," Claire said, wrapping both hands around her mug, "I have savings. Not a lot, but some. I'll figure something out. I just needed somewhere to go last night." "I know you will," I said. "You always do." She looked at me. "Are you angry?" "At you?" "No. At the situation." I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "I'm not angry. I know exactly what I'm going to do." The first call I made was to my attorney, a woman named Patricia, who has been practicing law for 38 years and who once told me she has never lost a case she believed in. I called her at 8 in the morning. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me," she said. I told her. I gave her Daniel's father's name, Gerald Whitmore Senior. I gave her the name of the firm. I told her about the house, the trust, the timing of the termination, the phone call to the supervisor at 10 o'clock at night. Patricia was quiet through all of it, asking only small clarifying questions. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. "The termination timing is interesting," she said, finally. "I thought so too. Saw." "He called the office before she'd even left the property?" "According to Claire, yes. She was still gathering Lily's things." "That's not a coincidence," Patricia said. "That's coordination. And if that coordination was designed to harm her financially, at the same moment she was being removed from her home, we may be looking at something considerably more than a personal dispute." She paused. "How quickly can you come in?" "I can be there by 10. "Good. Bring everything you have." What happened over the next 2 weeks moved faster than I expected, and slower than I wanted, in the way that all things involving lawyers and paper trails tend to do. Patricia's team pulled the employment records. Claire had a clean file. 6 years with documented commendations, 2 promotions, 1 raise approved in writing by Gerald Whitmore Senior himself, who sat on the firm's advisory board. The termination letter, sent at 10:47 at night via her supervisor's personal email, and not the firm's official HR system, cited restructuring. There had been no prior performance conversations, no warnings, no documentation of any kind. Meanwhile, my accountant pulled the Blue Water Capital records and sent them to Patricia with a cover letter. I was a minority investor, not a majority one. I want to be precise about that. But my stake was significant enough and structured in such a way that the firm's leadership owed me certain disclosures. Disclosures that, as it turned out, had not been fully made. Patricia called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in my garden. "Margaret," she said, and I could hear something in her voice that I had not heard before in our professional relationship, a kind of careful, controlled energy. "We need to talk about the financial records." I set down my trowel. "Tell me." "Gerald Senior has been moving money," she said, "through the firm's operating accounts. It's not obvious. It's been done carefully, over a period of about 14 months. But when you know what you're looking at, it's there." She paused. "He's been billing client expenses through the firm and redirecting portions of those reimbursements into a separate entity. The entity is registered in Delaware and has 1 officer listed." "Let me guess," I said. "His son." I stood in my garden for a moment, looking at the roses I had planted the year my mother died, because she had loved roses and I had wanted something living to tend. "How much?" I asked. Patricia told me. The number was not enormous in the context of the firm's overall revenue, but it was not small either, and more importantly, it was a pattern. 14 months of careful, deliberate misdirection. A paper trail that had been built to be invisible and had almost succeeded. Daniel had not built a house on land he owned. He had built it on land that already belonged to someone else. He had simply not understood whose. I want to tell you something about the morning I walked into the conference room at Whitmore and Associates. I wore a simple gray dress. My hair was down. I carried a leather portfolio that Patricia had given me as a gift when we closed my company sale, and I had never used it until that day. Gerald Whitmore Senior was already in the room when I arrived. He was a large man, expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from having been told his whole life that he was important. He had brought 2 attorneys with him. He did not stand when I entered. I sat down across from him. He looked at me the way men like him often look at women like me. A quick assessment, a rapid conclusion, a dismissal. I have seen that look many times in my life. It used to bother me when I was younger. Now I find it useful. It tells me exactly how much the other person is underestimating what is about to happen. Patricia set a folder on the table. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "we'd like to begin with the Delaware registration." I watched his face. It took him a half-second too long to arrange it into neutrality. In that half-second, I saw the exact moment he understood that something had gone wrong. What followed was not dramatic, the way these things appear in movies. It was mostly quiet and procedural. Documents were reviewed, questions were asked, certain answers were noted. His attorneys requested a recess twice. Patricia granted both requests with a pleasantness that I have always admired, because it unsettled people more than sharpness would have. At one point, Gerald Senior looked across the table directly at me and said, "I don't understand what your interest in this is." I looked back at him calmly. "Then let me explain it to you," I said. "My daughter worked at this firm for 6 years. She was good at her job. She was terminated at 10:47 at night via a personal email account with no HR documentation. At the same moment, your family removed her from her home. That was the decision that brought me to this table." He stared at me. "You're her mother." "I'm one of the things I am," I said. Patricia slid the blue water capital documentation across the table. He looked at it. Then he looked at me again. And in his face, I saw the specific kind of reckoning that comes when a person realizes that the woman they dismissed in a hallway, whose daughter they considered beneath them, had been sitting quietly at the edge of their financial life for 18 months. Claire did not know any of this was happening while it was happening. I made a deliberate choice about that. She was dealing with Lily, with finding new routines, with the grief of a marriage that had collapsed under her in a single night. She needed to breathe. She needed to take Lily to school and cook dinner and sleep. She did not need to be in the middle of what I was doing. The one thing I did tell her on a quiet evening when Lily was in bed and we were sitting on my back porch was this: "You don't need to worry about the job." She looked at me. "Mom, yeah, I'm not going to explain it yet," I said, "but I need you to trust me for a little while." She was quiet. Then she said, "Did you do something?" "I'm doing something," I said. "There's a difference." She shook her head slowly. "How are you always this calm?" I thought about it. "Because someone has to be," I said. "And you spent a long time being calm for Lily. Now let me be calm for you." She looked out at the yard. The porch light was on, and moths were drifting around it in slow circles. "He said I came from nothing," she said. Not with bitterness. More with a kind of wondering, as if she were still trying to understand it. "I know. I kept thinking about that on the bench. When I was waiting for you, I kept thinking, is that what he actually believes? That a person is just their last name? Just their family's money?" I let her talk. And then I thought, even if that were the measure, even on his own terms, he was wrong, because I had you. And I never really thought about what that meant until I was sitting on that bench with nowhere to go, and you were there in 12 minutes. I did not say anything for a while. Then, 11 minutes, I said. I was driving fast. She laughed. It was the first time I had heard her laugh in days, and it moved through me like something warm. The investigation took 4 months. Gerald Whitmore Senior, I will tell you plainly, did not go to prison. The amounts involved, while significant, fell into a complicated space where his attorneys were able to negotiate an outcome that involved repayment, substantial fines, and his resignation from every board and advisory position he held, including at Whitmore and Associates. Daniel resigned as well in a letter that his own attorney drafted and that Claire received via certified mail and read once and did not discuss further. The firm itself went through a restructuring. A new leadership team came in. Patricia, who had watched the whole thing with the composed satisfaction of someone who genuinely loves her work, recommended that the new management review outstanding personnel files with an eye toward wrongful termination claims. They did. On a Tuesday morning, 5 months after the night on the bench at Riverside Park, Claire received a call from the firm's new managing director. I was in the kitchen when she took the call in the next room. I did not listen. I made more coffee and waited. She came into the kitchen about 15 minutes later. She stood in the doorway for a moment. They want me back, she said. Full reinstatement, back pay for the period of termination, and a formal written apology from the firm. I looked at her. What do you want to do? She tilted her head. I want to go back. I love that job. Then go back. But I need to know something first. She crossed her arms slowly. Mom, what exactly is Blue Water Capital? I set down the coffee pot. That, I said, is a longer conversation. I told her everything that evening, all of it. The firm's sale, the holding company, the investment, the reasons I had never said anything. She listened for a long time without speaking. When I finished, she was quiet for a full minute. So when Gerald Senior kicked me out, she said slowly, he was kicking me out of a situation where my own mother had a stake in the company he used to destroy my career. That's accurate. And he had no idea. None. She shook her head, not with anger, with something more like disbelief at the sheer scale of the miscalculation. He looked at me and saw nothing, she said. And he looked at you and saw, what? A retired grandmother? I think so, yes. And that was his mistake. That, I said, was his mistake. Lily came running in from the living room then, socks sliding on the kitchen floor, waving a drawing she had made at school, a house with a large sun above it, and 4 figures standing in front, one much taller than the others, with a scribble of white hair. Grandma, that's you, she announced, pointing at the tall figure. You're in the middle because you're the most important. Claire looked at the drawing and then at me, and her eyes did something complicated and beautiful. I took the drawing from Lily and looked at it carefully. The white-haired figure in the middle had enormous hands, disproportionately large, reaching out toward the smaller figures on either side. I love it, I said. Can I keep it? Yes, Lily said, already running back toward the living room. But you have to put it on the refrigerator where everyone can see. I smoothed the drawing flat on the counter and found a magnet. Here is what I have learned. In 63 years of being alive and 35 years of building things, and 4 months of watching a person who underestimated my family, reckon with that decision. Power that announces itself is not the most dangerous kind. The most dangerous kind is quiet. It doesn't need to tell you what it is. It doesn't need you to know it's there until the moment it becomes necessary. Gerald Whitmore Senior walked into a situation he thought he controlled entirely, because he had assessed every person in it and found them manageable. He looked at my daughter and saw a woman without resources. He looked at me and saw nothing, not worth looking at twice. He was not the first man to make that calculation. He will not be the last. But if you are listening to this and you are the daughter sitting on a bench with your child in her pajamas and your whole life in 2 suitcases, I want you to hear me clearly. Call your mother. Call your sister. Call the woman in your life who has been quietly building something while the world looked elsewhere. Because we are here. We have always been here. And we know exactly what to do. Lily's drawing is still on my refrigerator. It has been there for 7 months now. I have no plans to take it down.